Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, and I have two guests today, Hapi Hara and Johndennis Govert. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having us on your show.
I got very excited when I saw your book, The Chintamani Crystal Matrix. And I think I'm just going to have to ask you, what is the Chintamani Crystal?
It is the wish-fulfilling gem. So there's a number of explanations, but Chinta in Sanskrit, that root means sort of like to care for, to think about, to be concerned about. It has that idea. And then the mani part just means jewel. So it has been translated as the wish-fulfilling jewel most of the time. But it could also be like the mind jewel or the thought jewel. It is, on a conventional level, it's considered to be some great gem that grants the ability to take care of people, and it grants sort of power. So the whole paradox of the Chintamani is that if somebody without a compassionate sense has it, then they can create great havoc in the world. And then it really should be wielded by somebody who has compassion and concern for the world, for a wide variety of people. They're here for the benefit.
It's something that really does capture the imagination, and it automatically, I think of Indiana Jones adventures and of course Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and so there's something here that really does capture the imagination. Can you tell us a little bit about the root of this, shall we call it, idea for the moment?
Sure. We worked at a resort together and we did some joint presentations. And so, we sort of like put our expertises together, and then we came up with this, talking about the wish-fulfilling gem and relative to crystals, relative to like just manifesting what you want in life. And then it just got bigger because we went on our own hero's journey because of, what we started to do. And the weird thing I would say in the very beginning is that we found a representation of this stone like everywhere. I mean, it just wasn't in Hinduism. It just wasn't in Buddhism. It just wasn't in Japan, China. I mean, we just started looking across cultures and it was just embedded. We even found it in Turkey. I mean, it's like, it just kept going and going. And it was so like in your face. It's always there. It's never pointed to. It's in the background. But it's present. It's present the whole time. So it's one of those kind of oddities of history that it's everywhere, but nobody talks about it.
I think of the Chintamani as an archetype, and that's why, like, kind of going back to the Indiana Jones movies, I think that's what makes some of the Indiana Jones movies so compelling. He's searching for an archetypal type of object, and it frequently is some type of a crystal or a stone. Or even Harry Potter. We actually mentioned that in the book about, like, even in modern culture, pop culture, there's this search, or even in video games, always searching for this archetypal object, and it's frequently some kind of powerful stone. And we found this archetype across cultures that going back thousands of years. I mean, even in Christianity, there's literally hundreds of references to crystals and gemstones in the Bible. And the high priest in front of the Ark of the Covenant, he would wear a breastplate with 12 very powerful stones. And in Hebrew, according to Hebrews, the high priest was communicating with God through the stones. So this notion of, like, say, crystal energy or powerful crystals that can help enlighten us or communicate with higher source, this goes back thousands of years.
Indeed. And the other thing that obviously came to mind was the Holy Grail. How much medieval literature was written about the quest for the Holy Grail. So this is a very, as you absolutely, I can completely see why you say this is an archetype. So what are we to learn from this archetype?
Well, I think when you kind of dissect the Grail legends, which we did in our book, we referenced the Grail. We have a whole section about it. Originally, if you go back through the Grail literature, the Grail is not really a cup. It's actually a crystal, like some sort of green, powerful crystal. But we also think like why it might be referred to as a cup is because the crystal is some type of quantum holder. And this is what gets us really into why we're calling this the Chintamani Crystal Matrix. And the subtitle of our book is Quantum Intention, the Wish Fulfilling Gem, is because it's a little bit more than like, say, an ordinary crystal that you might buy at a store or collect. It's some kind of a crystal that seems to be, activated by the human mind, because the word Chintamani means mind gem. And I think it's the connection between the mind, intention, and matter, and then it turns into a quantum holder. And we actually have a whole section about even the science of quantum intention and quantum matter and working with crystals too. And so in our book, we talk about I think the unification of even science and spirituality, bringing those two together, which I think we're just at the cutting edge of that right now. But in our book, we also have like sections on how to work with tangible crystals and start working with intention. But then Johndennis actually wrote a whole series of practices that are more yoga based that can go even deeper into taking us, from, like you don't just have to hold a crystal. It's like you intend the crystal in your mind and in your heart. Do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. There's a basic practice in Hinduism, Tantrism, and in Tibetan Buddhism about visualizing yourself as, you'd say a deity. They use the word yidam, but it's like that visualization is more close to how you really are. As we look in the mirror, that's our karmic reflection. But unfettered of karma, we approach more like the pictures of all these various deities. So you visualize yourself as that. And so what we're doing in this one is visualizing the deity and then visualizing the Chintamani in some form. A lot of times, just as a picture, it's this turnipy looking sort of piece of stone, but it's the Chintamani because it's on fire. So it's like that makes it not an ordinary crystal. It's lit up, it's switched on. And so the meditations, in a sense, are a way to like visualize yourself in that world, to connect with that stone, to use that sort of stone sort of like in a visual way. And then over time, you can refine what you believe the stone to be, like what's the manifestation? Because throughout history, there have been different gems that have, been the emblem of the Chintamani. The ruby, sapphire, moldavite. There's just this whole range, really, of it. Well, they're not really ordinary, are they? They're gems, right? These fine gems, but that you could encounter in the physical world.
I think for me, at a very simple level, when I look at all the myths around the Chintamani, what I feel is that it's teaching us at a very simple level two things. Number one, intention is energy. It matters because it's energy. And number two, there's something about crystals that is going to perhaps amplify that energy. And I think that is an extremely exciting proposition, that we can use crystals to amplify the energy of our intention. And then, of course, you know, as we know from Indiana Jones, it does depend on the purity of the intention as to what the outcome is going to be. And so we're looking at crystals as objects of tremendous potential and tremendous power. And what are we going to do with that? I think that there's something in these stories that's very much about the choice that we always have to make as human beings. What are we going to do with what we've got? How are we going to use it? Selfishly or selflessly?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about what you call the Chintamani Crystal Matrix.
The Chintamani Crystal Matrix is like a second way of looking at it. So you could look at the gems as being like just like a single gem, great gem. But then there's a number of places that talk about the jewel net, you know, and so it's one of the mythologies, so that it's in Indra, the king of the gods, and you know, in the devas in Hinduism, has this giant net of crystals, and every node there's a great gem that's there. And in his, or I mean, I should say, in that mythology, it does two things: it protects people, and also it acts as a weapon. Actually, you know, it has like both sides to it. And then in the Buddhist interpretation of this gem net, it's about like there's a gem, and it is sort of like the node of creation. So it's like the entire universe is powered by this net of gems that is actually involved in the creation of reality moment by moment, you know. And it's like self-arising. So so first of all, we ended up researching that, but then secondly, we had sort of a tangible connection to this matrix when we connected with the crystal skulls. And I'll let Happy talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, and I can talk about the crystal skulls, but I also want to add on about like even tangible grids that actually exist too. Like kind of going back to the Hebrew breastplate, you know, that is a grid of crystals. Okay, that he's wearing over his heart. Also in Hinduism, there's something called the Navaratna, which you know, which is a 3x3 grid of 9 gems that they use, and they use grids with other crystals too. And sometimes these can be like even little gridded rings. They'll put all 9 gems in a ring or in a pendant. And the Jewish people do that too with the breastplate. They'll actually wear little mini breastplates with all 12 gems, you know, that's kind of like a talisman. But I also think we see it in larger structures like Stonehenge and the stone circles. You know, those are grids as well. You know, they're circular grids. And in my own experimentation with I was doing an experiment by putting, you know, granite rocks and circles in my backyard, and I took dowsing rods and I created a vortex field of energy using, you know, a circle of gridded rocks. And you do this with labyrinths too. You know, all these are grids of a form, and so putting crystals or even rocks into grids like focuses energy in a very specific sort of way. And so that's like, to me, that's kind of like working with the tangible crystals and rocks to get us to, you know, kind of harness the energy. But I think, like, you know, even like in places like Stonehenge, part of the what we're seeing with that energy is I think like the druids or the priests who are working there were using the energy in a very directed and intentional way. Okay. And that's the reason why we even do crystal grids too, is like you're wishing for, like, say, money or love, wealth, or something like that, and you're using the grids in this way. But the purity of our intention is really what is so purity is a real something to really focus on, because I think of the grid as kind of like being the engine, bringing in the energy, but how are you focusing it? Okay. And so now, kind of going over to crystal skulls, that takes us into another area, because, like, you know, there are some people who think, like, if you put these like 12 sacred skulls together, you know, something very powerful will happen, even though I've heard differing stories that there really aren't 12 skulls, that, you know, it's kind of like an Indiana Jones kind of myth. Going back to Indiana Jones again. There's actually quite a few of ancient skulls. I think there's far more than 12 from my research. But we have noticed in when we have worked with crystal skulls, like we've seen the Mitchell Hedges skull, we've been in its presence and had a session with it, and also with another one here in Tucson called Synergy. And those are very palpable, very strong crystals in the shape of a skull. And but I think you were mentioning this because they're, you know, because of, like, there's supposed to be 12 of them, correct?
Well, partly that, but also because we had very palpable experiences.
Yeah.
One of which was just, you know, in its presence, we were aware of all the crystals and all the other skulls, you know. So what, we weren't even thinking like, oh, we should try to connect with this. It was just bing, you know, it appeared. And then it was, you know, and it's like, and it's there anytime you want to connect to it. But it was just so strong, and also, you know, not thought about. It was just arose by itself.
I think regular viewers of In the Light may recall an interview that I did a while back with David Elkington, who was talking about sacred sound. But he, in his book, talks about what you were saying about Stonehenge and other places like the pyramids, which were really about concentrated energy. And he talks about granite in being used specifically for that purpose of intention, to generate a specific type of energy, which then would also be heightened through sound, and the human voice being one of the instruments, so through chanting, etc., which I found absolutely fascinating myself as well. So it's the idea of the skulls, though, I find quite intriguing. What is it with skulls? What's behind them in the symbol?
Well, I think when we first encountered the Mitchell Hedges skull, I mean, I actually was a little bit suspicious of them. Okay, I probably walked into that situation kind of feeling like, well, what is this really, you know? And I was astounded by the wave of energy coming off of Mitchell Hedges. It went through the whole room, and I went into a trance state very quickly. Okay. And I felt like my mind linked into the skull. We were in this scenario where there was like a presentation being done, and there was a channel where people could ask questions of the skull, and the channel would answer what the skull was saying. And what ended up happening is, like, my mind linked into the skull so well that I could hear the skull saying the answer before the channel could say it. Okay. I mean, it was really quite remarkable. I don't know if I've ever linked into a crystal so intensely before. And I saw these other experiences where there was other beings in the room. And I looked at my body, and it's like I was looking through my body like you would through an X-ray, like something, like I could see my body completely differently. Okay. And then what ended up happening, so myself and this Reiki practitioner who I was with, we did a session with Mitchell Hedges, you know, just a private session. And so both of us put our hands on the skull, and then Bill Holman, who was the keeper of the skull, was there too. All three of us had our hands on the skull. And it's like we linked up into, I think it was like this crystal matrix. It's like we linked up to a bunch of the powerful sites on the planet. Like it seemed like we were at Stonehenge, Karnak, and other places I hadn't even been to before, but like we were linking into these power spots, and they were like power nodes on the earth. And so then all of us were doing this prayer or intention, you know, to help the planet. And then it was all going into, I mean, what seemed to be like a matrix.
What do you think it is? Is it the actual shape of the skull, or was it the crystal that it was made of? What do you think was happening there?
I think part of it does have to do with the actual shape, because even other, like say less powerful crystal skulls, I think you can take like you go buy one of those crystal skulls and be able to link with it better because it's in the shape of a skull. Okay. And so in a way, what I sensed with Mitchell Hedges is that at times I felt like I was actually wearing it, like you would a helmet or a mask, like you could just put it on, you know, into your brain. And it was another layer. And I think that makes it easier to work with the crystal then, like to interface with it, because it's in the same shape as the human mind. So I think that's part of it. Now, it could absolutely be the quality of the quartz or where the quartz was found, but it could also have to do with whoever made the crystal made it with a certain intention and actually programmed something into it, because you can embed quartz with information. And it could be that whoever made the Mitchell Hedges skull actually knew how to program information into it.
So what I find really exciting here is that not only do we have the possibility of the potency of the shape, perhaps contributing to making the energy stronger, but we also have the intention. And I love that, because it means that there is an interaction then between us and the crystals. It's not a one-way thing, that we can also be contributing to that crystal, and then the crystal amplifies. We're back to the original stories, aren't we?
Yes, and you know, and so I have a quartz crystal right here. Okay, I have lots of crystals naturally, but well, I do a lot of one-on-one sessions. I teach workshops, I teach lectures, and I actually teach people how to embed, like say, intentional energy into quartz. All right, and you know the way that, and there is an interaction between our energy and our thought and our mind intention and the crystal. Quartz crystal is pyroelectrical. This is a scientific fact. And we discussed this in some detail in the book too, about the science behind crystals. And so, you know, a simple way of activating it, just simply like, you know, rubbing the quartz and actually holding it and heating it up. So think of like the own heat that you're generating from your body and your own bioelectrical field. As like when you're holding the quartz and interacting with it, you turn it on, you wake it up. You got quartz too, okay? So you holding it and rubbing it, you're waking it up. And then after a period of time, it starts warming up. And at a period of time, the quartz will actually start feeling, you know, softer, or the density will change. I was teaching a workshop about this yesterday, and people were telling me in the workshop about how their crystal had changed. Like it felt like it was lighter, or the temperature had shifted, or they felt like it had molded into their hands. That's another one I hear a lot. Like they feel like it almost feels like clay. It's molding into your hand. Once you have those experiences with quartz, that means it's awake, it's alive, it's turned on, okay? And that means it's generating a harmonic field. And that's why it's used in clocks and watches, because it harmonizes ticking. And so our heart is ticking as well. So when we place quartz over our heart field, okay, our heart energy, it's going to harmonize our ticking. And the ticking of our heart becomes disharmonious mainly through stress. You know, maybe the mind is causing a lot of stress in our life, and then our bodies get out of harmony. But think of quartz as helping to bring you back into harmony. And then once you and the quartz are connected in that harmonic wavelength, and you can do this also with mantra and sound. And I'll let Johndennis talk about that more in a little bit. But you know, so you can also get that harmonic state with the sound. And so then once you're in that harmonic state, it's about kind of like connecting with your chakras, putting your intention in your mind, putting your intention in your heart, putting it in your solar plexus. You can go through all your chakras and then bring that intention up and then breathe it into the quartz crystal with your breath, okay? And then once the quartz crystal has that intention embedded in it, then it's a matter of you just opening yourself up and receiving it. Because there's quartz crystals made of silica, and we have silica in us too. And so it's about connecting, say those atoms. Again, it's like a matrix of atoms. And so I'm always telling people it's not the quartz doing all the work. You're turning it on, okay? It's sending a harmonic field. You're putting the intention in there, and it's sending it back to you. So really the quartz is programming you. What you're doing is using the quartz as a programming, an external programming technique to program yourself. So it really is a two-way street. It's not just a magic crystal by itself. It's what you do with it.
I love that. And one of the ways in which I use them is when I hold them. I've got two, and I hold them in my hands whilst I'm meditating. I started doing it when I first discovered that they amplify energy, and I thought perhaps this would help to raise my frequency if I was holding them in my hands. And what I discover is that there are times when they feel like they're bouncing in my hands. So it's not so much in my experience that I experience them as changing shape. They do become warmer because I'm holding them, obviously. But what I find really interesting is when I feel that it's a bit like corn popping in my hands.
Oh,
that kind of energy that I always wonder what that means. What's it doing when it does that? If I love it because to me it's a symbol that it's alive. It's, you know, it's something's happening. But I keep thinking, oh, I wonder what that is.
yeah, well, it's part of the pyroelectricity effect, and you know, and that's part of the reason why, kind of going back to like stone circles. A lot of those places they're made with granite, okay, and and granite has a high percentage of quartz in it, and so you're interacting with the quartz. And even places like Newgrange in Ireland, at some point, Newgrange was completely encased in quartz crystals. And so they knew that, like the Druids, the ancient Celtic peoples knew that quartz, they even called it the sunstone. They knew that it was they knew it was pyroelectrical.
Yeah, they must have known. I don't know how they discovered it, but they must have known. And yeah, it's maybe they were dowsing and discovered it through dowsing, but they certainly knew because all the places seem to have this quality to them. So very, very exciting. And I think that Johndennis, you were going to talk to us about sound adding to this.
Right. Picked up on your topic from before. So there's a number of ways to create resonance. So one, you know, the rubbing and holding it is one, putting it by your heart, but also another, you know, add in another layer. You know, it's a layer of sound then. And the mantras are really meant to be chanted in a way where you feel them in your body. So it doesn't matter how loud or soft your voice is. It's just you have that, you know, where it actually vibrates your body. And so that's the kind of state you want to do with it. And then there's a number of mantras that could be related to what your specific intention is. I mean, so you could even further match it up. So if you're working on compassion, you can use the Om Mani Padme Om mantra, and then you do it in repetition for 108 times, or in sets of that. But the main thing is that you are entraining your body with sound, and the sound itself is like activating the stone or the crystal, and it's activating you, and it's then it sort of like takes the energy activation just to sort of like another level. And you don't have to continue it. I mean, you don't have, if you're going to like meditate for say 10 minutes, you only need to, maybe you do it for 5 minutes, and then you just sit quietly when you're quieted, and then just be in that state. Then you could chant again, but it's like, it's very spontaneous in a sense, because you're just paying attention to like what's your own energy state, and it's going to be more open, and you'll be getting information, or it may just be quiet, so it's just, you go with whatever's happening. But and you can also then use it for healing, like just like you could take let's say if something wrong with your shoulder, you can put the crystal there, but you could also focalize, you could use the crystal just as it's touching you to focalize your attention there, and then you try to feel the sound, the hum, that's at that spot, and it helps you just create the focus, because the crystal itself has energy, the sound has energy, and it's connecting at that node.
I love that. And I guess the question I have then is, if I was going to use these crystals for healing, I'm guessing that what I should do before I begin is sit with them and have a clear intention for how they are to be used.
Yes, whenever I'm teaching, like say workshops about intention and crystal, I actually start off with having people clear themselves and clear the crystal together, and then say if it's a more deeper workshop and we have some time, I'll go deeper into, okay, like, well, what is your intention? Start off with that too, like even write it down. Then do some, like say, some purification work with white light, some meditation. And I even tell people, like, you think you know what you want, put that down, now release it, okay? Let that go and just clear yourself, kind of go into a void state. And, and kind of clear your chakras, do some meditation, do some white light purification with the quartz and yourself together. And then what I have noticed that sometimes once people have finished that part, before they actually embed the intention in the crystal, their intention has changed. Okay, so and I think we spent quite a bit of time in the book talking about the importance of intention. No, and kind of like, it's more than knowing what we think we want. It's like, what do you want in your heart? What is actually good for your body? What your heart wants is really different than what your mind wants. Everyone wants to win the lottery, but your heart doesn't even know what the lottery is. It could care less about the lottery, okay? It doesn't even care about money, and so I think it's a little bit about like connecting the deeper primal core intentions. Like, I think if we look at that, our needs become a lot more simple and a lot more clear.
Well, I would recommend that anyone wanting to learn more about crystals and their wonderful potential for the part that they can play in bettering our lives and, in fact, the whole of humanity, that they have a look at your book. And the book that we are talking about is the Chintamani Crystal Matrix. And I will be putting a link to that on the description box. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work and your workshops, how could they do that?
We have a website, and that website is chintamanimatrix.com. And we have a lot of information on that site. In fact, we write a monthly newsletter or blog about astrology and the new moon and the crystal of the month, or the crystal of the cycle. Okay. And we also have, like these free little training videos embedded on the website too, where he talks about, where Johndennis talks about like how to meditate with the Chintamani. And then I go through I have like a meditation video where I teach you how to clear and connect with quartz crystal. And so we have a lot of information on our website. And we also do sessions too. We're both astrologers. I do crystal astrology. Johndennis does astrology and Chinese astrology. So yeah, we offer services too.
Marvelous. I shall be sure to put a link to that in the description box as well. Thank you, Hapi and Johndennis, for your time today.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be finding Zen in the ordinary. Until then, have a wonderful week. Goodbye.